Welcome everybody to the our first time home buyer webinar live from the Lansing, Michigan area. My name is Adriane Lau and this is Rayce O'Connell. We're with Remax in East Lansing and we're so happy that you joined us today. We want to share with you some information today about the home buying process, some mistakes that we've seen first time home buyers make, how to avoid them, of course, and then also go into a little bit more information about how things have changed since the COVID crisis. Obviously, a lot has changed about how houses are being marketed and how people are viewing those properties. So let's jump in here and we will take a look at a little bit more about the process. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you might be just trying to get your head a little bit around how the process is. So let's take you through first the steps of the home buying process. So the first thing is getting pre-approved for a mortgage if you're not paying cash, which most first-time home buyers are not. And what's involved in that is meeting with a lender to discuss which type of mortgage is going to be appropriate for your situation. A conventional mortgage is the most common, but there are other mortgages like a VA or an FHA or even down payment assistance options if you want to keep your down payment a little bit lower. So the lender is going to be looking for your credit information, your debts and income and all of that information you'd expect them to look for. And then they're going to give you an idea of what you can be pre-approved for, which would be your max budget, not necessarily where you want to keep your budget. That's a whole separate conversation, which Rayce will touch on in just a little bit. The second thing is finding your agent. So we're going to talk a lot more about agency in the presentation, but this is the person who's going to be with you from start to finish to help you with the process, learn what you like and don't like, and be your sounding board through the process. Now comes the fun part, finding a house, and that step can take vastly different amounts of time depending on who you are. So some people fly in from out of state and they look for one day and buy a house. We're seeing right now people buying houses without even ever stepping foot inside. Or, you know, maybe it takes you a year. There's no right or wrong there. I would say average is probably, what do you think, Rayce? Maybe 4 weeks or so, but it just depends on you. When you find the house that you're interested in enough to write an offer, we do the research about what's been going on in the neighborhood, make sure that the price seems fair, and then we present the offer to the seller. At that point, they're either going to accept your offer, reject your offer, or give you a counter offer. So sometimes this process goes back and forth a little bit. Honestly, for the last couple of years, we've been in what's called a seller's market where there have been more buyers for properties than homes available. So the really good homes, we're getting 6 offers, 7 offers, tons of offers. And we'll see now how things shift with COVID and the economy shifting and all that. I don't know how it's going to change yet, but it certainly will change. Once you get an offer accepted on the house, then the next thing that happens is your home inspection. So this is a really important part of the process, which we are going to take a little bit deeper dive into in just a second. But we want you to plan on budgeting about $500 for your home inspections. The main home inspection was going to be your plumbing, electrical, structural, mechanical, and pest and radon are something in our area that are quite important to do. If you're purchasing a property that's out in the country, in certain counties, the seller will pay for this. In certain counties, the buyer will pay for this. So if you're looking in Clinton County, Ionia, Eaton, it would be a buyer expense to pay for the well and the septic tests. In Ingham, Shiawassee counties, those are, the seller pays for it there. It's just a difference in municipality. After the home inspection, now you can do one of 3 things. You can say, everything's what I was expecting, let's move forward. You can say, hell no, I don't want to buy this house anymore, get your deposit back, move on. Or the most common thing that happens is we find something that we didn't know when we were walking through the property, especially now that we're getting into virtual stuff a lot more. And so we go back to the seller and say, hey, they still want to buy the house, but we need A, B, and C to be fixed in order for them to feel comfortable to do that. And it's just whatever you're comfortable with. After the home inspection, then we send all of the information over to your lender and they get the appraisal ordered. Two things I want to mention about this. First, the reason that we wait to order the appraisal is that sometimes the price changes after the home inspection. Sometimes the price goes down, and honestly, sometimes it goes up if we're trying to split a repair or something like that. So we need to have the final price before we send the appraiser out. The second thing a lot of people don't realize is that the appraiser knows what you're paying for the house. They get a copy of that purchase agreement. So fully 90% of the time, the appraisal comes back at the purchase price. This is normal. It's okay. If it comes in above the purchase price, that's awesome. It's not super common. Where we would have an issue is if it came in below what the purchase price was. So let's say that you had offered $100,000 and the appraisal came in at $97,000. That means that your bank is not going to loan on an amount more than $97,000. So you would either have to ask the seller to lower the price or come up with the difference in cash, or realistically, often what happens is some of both. So anyway, once we get through the appraisal, we send everything over to the underwriter and they bug you for an updated this and that and the other thing. And then they say, okay, we are clear to close, which means the lender is ready to send money to close the house. That's exciting. And so we can go ahead and get the closing scheduled. At closing, you're going to have some expenses, of course. You'll have your down payment, your closing costs to the lender, and what's called escrows or prepaids, where you put down up front some money for future taxes and insurance. Now, if you want, we want to let you know that Rayce and I will be available after this for questions. You've got a question and answer thing on your screen there too, if you want to send us a question, or we'd be happy to do, a one-on-one with you through Zoom so we can talk a little bit more about the details of what these costs might be for you, because some of them are going to depend on the type of loan, what you're putting down. But closing costs is an important thing in the mortgage process too, because if you're getting this great interest rate, but you're paying double what you should for closing costs, it might not be as great as it seems. So let's jump into some of the mistakes that we've seen. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A and we'll make sure to do our best to answer them. So Rayce, why don't you take it away with mistake number one?
All right, thank you, Adriane. I think the number one mistake that happens the most often, just because Zillow is so available and it's enticing to start looking at homes before we get through the logistics and the more boring financial aspects of it, is not being pre-approved or trusting the payments that are on Zillow. Zillow doesn't have access to the tax information and things of that sort. So the Zillow price estimates of everything are a little bit wonky when it comes to reality. So that kind of builds bad expectations on behalf of buyers, and it kind of like dwindles the fun of the buying experience for some people. So I highly recommend that you always go to a lender first and kind of discuss what your budget is. That way you can know where to look within your price brackets for the ideal home and the right price you want to pay per month for a mortgage. And without a pre-approval letter, you can't really submit an offer, because they need to know that you are actually able to buy the house. They're not just going to hope and pray that you're just going to be qualified, especially if you're competing with other people. They're going to come first before you, because it's more assurance for the seller. And then there are different types of loans. So most commonly, the issues that come up with FHA are a lot of the homes that first buyers are interested in won't qualify for the FHA standard, so that they'll only want cash or a conventional loan, which kind of makes a bummer for a lot of people. So it's important to know going forward so we can build the right expectations and make the whole buying experience a lot more pleasant for you by going to a lender first and kind of creating realistic expectations for what's possible.
Yep. So let's talk about mistake number two. You heard me say earlier that we were going to dig in a lot deeper into the agency. So real estate agents work at times for buyers and at times for sellers. There's two different types of agents, those working for the seller, those working for the buyer. And what happens is, what I've seen happen is buyers get really excited about the shopping process, and they're on Zillow or realtor.com or whatever site you like, and you click the we want to see this house. And what you don't necessarily always realize is that it's sending you a lot of times to the agent that's representing the seller. They have a legal fiduciary relationship with the seller, and their job is to get the seller the best price on the property. So if you ask their opinion about the price, they have to tell you, well, this price is the fair price. If you hire a buyer's agent, now you have somebody representing you that can pull comps in the neighborhood, point out things about the condition, give you their opinion on price, if it's too high, if it's too low, what they think is going to happen as far as competition goes. But the very best part about this is that the seller will still pay the commission. And let me break down how that works. So when a property is listed for sale, the seller says, Agent X, I would like you to sell my house and I'll offer you a commission to do that. And that agent wants to give the property as much exposure as possible. So they offer a portion, it's usually half of the commission, to the buyer's agents to bring their buyers through the property. So obviously you're buying the house and then the seller's paying the commission, but it's not an out-of-pocket expense. And one thing that Rayce and I are particularly proud of is that in 2019, which is our most recent information, we were able to net our sellers 2.6% above the average agent and net our buyers 1.2% lower than average. So that just shows you that we really do take that fiduciary very seriously. Those don't seem like big numbers, but when you're talking in terms of on a $100,000 house, that's $2,700 or $1,100 or $1,200 and so on. I mean, it really does make a difference if you're working with a quality agent. Rayce is going to talk about the third mistake and his recent personal experience with it as he was shopping for his first home.
Yeah, so when we were buying our house, we got caught up in one example, a house that was out in Corunna, which is not a bad area or anything, but it's a 45-minute drive for work for me. So adding 2 hours worth of commute basically every single day for work kind of created a headache. It would be even farther if I'm going out to the Portland or Grand Ledge areas. So before I could be enticed in buying a beautiful home without that, I quickly moved to another home, which I settled on a home that was not aesthetically pleasing, but it had a brand new roof, a brand new water heater, and a brand new furnace, which really when you're buying a house, you want to buy bones. You don't want to buy the facelift that someone has given it, because that's always doable later and it's a non-emergency item. But when you move into a house and the roof leaks and the furnace stops working within the first couple months, that's when you're really facing a headache and you really start to regret it. So,
and you guys have to realize that Rayce just bought this house a couple weeks ago. So he's in the middle of repainting everything and he's still saying that. So it was still.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now that actually brings us to a really good point, which is mistake number 4. Let's say that you fall madly in love with the house and everything is perfect, except maybe it does have an old furnace or maybe it does have an old roof. If that's something that you can tell up front, let's negotiate it up front. I don't want to get you to the point of paying $500 for an inspection just to find out that the seller's not going to budge on replacing that roof and that you can't buy the house if it doesn't have a new roof, because a lot of types of financing won't allow it if it's, got leaking issues and that sort of thing. So, and that's one of those things, we've done this enough that we have the proper verbiage and the way to go back to the seller and protect you to make sure, hey, we want this roof to be done by a licensed contractor with a 30-year architectural shingle and a permit and a tear off, and so that we can protect you and make sure you're still getting a quality job and not having those major expenses the second that you close on the house. Whoops. All right. And Rayce, why don't you take it away with mistake number 5?
Yeah, so if you guys remember the first slide that Adriane presented on, it was kind of the process, and we always shoot for 6 weeks because that's kind of the average timeline. So when we set the closing date, it's usually 6 weeks in advance to let everyone know this is when we plan to get things done. However, if you need the roof work to be done, but the weather isn't really conditionally appropriate for that, or the appraisal takes a little bit longer than usual. It's just, there's a lot of people that have to work into this. So setting up with your friends and family to be like, hey, on May 21st, I want you guys here on this day to move, and scheduling all of that, you're going to have a headache last minute, because sometimes we have to extend the close, because we can't close until the bank gives us that clear to close. So just keep that in mind, that you should always just kind of,
have a more clear idea as things go on, if we're going to have issues with inspections or appraisals or title or any of those sorts of things. That's a really good point. So we couldn't leave you today without talking about how the current pandemic is affecting the real estate industry. Real estate agents are not essential per the Governor Whitmer's order, and that this morning was extended until May 15th, you probably know. So we're not able to do in-person walkthroughs right now, but there's tons of stuff that we can do. And honestly, we're still selling houses. It's just, we're selling them, like we mentioned at the beginning, subject to seeing it in person. So we can deliver videos, walkthroughs with the seller if it's an occupied home, photos. We can do every other part of the process. Inspectors are essential. Appraisers are essential. Banks are essential. So there's lots of things that we can do. And we're going to be closing next week on a house that went under contract after the stay home order. And this buyer has never seen the house. But you know what? It was the time in his life when it was the right time to move, and you know, it is what it is, and hopefully he likes it. I hope so. That's actually not a totally new thing either. Honestly, we've probably done, even before COVID, a couple, 3-4 houses a year where we're selling them via FaceTime or YouTube videos or whatever sort of media we need to create to get people comfortable. And as you heard me mention at the beginning, this is super good news for you if you're a buyer, because there's going to be less competition. Interest rates are very low. And, you know, if you can get comfortable buying in a time of uncertainty, you can get an unprecedentedly good deal. I mean, it's just the way of markets. So kind of cool stuff. If you are interested in having your own private home buying consultation where we're not live on the internet, we'd be happy to schedule something with you. Just shoot us an email or a text. We can do a Zoom call. We'd be happy to even coordinate to have a lender come on the call and talk about a deep dive into which type of mortgage is going to be the best option for you, and what you're looking for, of course, and talk about what's out there. So if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. Otherwise, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And Rayce, have a good day.
You too, Adrian. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.